invite Dr. Barbara Maas, who has worked in international wildlife conservation for over 2 decades and on every continent. Dr. Maas has worked as an advisor and chief executive for conservation and animal welfare organizations around the world and as a senior civil servant with New Zealand. In 2009, she was honored for her contribution to tiger conservation by the Royal Government of Cambodia. Dr. Maas was instrumental in realization of the historic Buddhist climate change statement, which was presented at the Paris Climate Summit in 2015. She currently holds the position of Head of Endangered Species Conservation of NABU International, Germany's oldest and largest conservation organization. Dr. Barbara Maas.
Just open the presentation. Maybe. Right. Your Holinesses, Excellencies, distinguished scholars, spiritual leaders, ladies and gentlemen, fellow earthlings. It is a great privilege for me to be here today and to talk to you about an issue that is very dear to my heart. In 2000, and so we're here to talk about peace, harmony, and security, and I heard yesterday the general say, we are looking for something that we have all in common. Here's something we all have in common. We all live on planet Earth. And I think that is what will unite us, hopefully, and what must unite us, and why I will explain now. In 1973, the German psychologist Erich Fromm coined the term biophilia to describe the passionate love of life and all that is alive. A decade later, the very famous American biologist Edward Wilson defined biophilia in his book of the same title as the urge to affiliate with other forms of life. I would like you to tune into your biophilia because it resonates, at least in Buddhism, with the concept of reverence for life, loving kindness, and universal interconnectedness. So we should be familiar with the term, with this sentiment. I believe that embracing and integrating these ideas into our lives provides the solution to the most serious crisis ever faced by life on Earth, as the frantic scramble for power, identity, possessions, resources that grips our increasingly crowded, consumerist, dog-eat-dog world drowns out our sense of interconnectedness and affinity with each other and the natural world. The 200,000-year-old history of human colonization of this world has resulted in the most dramatic planetary takeover since life began. Initially, our limited numbers largely diluted our impact on the planet's diversity of life. When the Buddha was born in 623 BC, the Earth was home to approximately 154 million people. We crossed the 1 billion mark sometime in the early 19th century, and in the course of my lifetime alone, the population has risen from 3 billion in 1960 to more than 7.5 billion today. Human populations are projected to reach 9.8 billion by 2050 and over 11 billion by 2100. We have reached a stage where the sheer onslaught of human population growth and associated consumption has simply outstripped the planet's biocapacity. The Earth's ecosystems are like a bank account. If what you take out exceeds what you put in, you are heading for bankruptcy. Earth Overshoot Day is a day that was first calculated in 1971, and it describes the day when humanity has used the resources in a particular year that the Earth can regenerate in that year. And since it was calculated devised in 1971, Earth Overshoot Day has crept forward by about 5 months. We just passed it, the 2nd of August. We are now in a deficit. We are going bankrupt. I would like to echo the comments made by the minister before me just now about humanity's impact on the Earth, which is now so profound that experts refer increasingly to the current geological epoch as the Anthropocene, the age of man. This is not, alas, something to be proud of. It is defined by nuclear tests, plastic pollution, mass livestock production, and the degradation of the entire global ecosystem that all organisms, including us, depend on for air, water, food, and shelter. I talked in Samvad 1 about climate change. I will just briefly summarize, because we're talking about peace and conflict avoidance. There are many effects of climate change, which you can read here, that are not conducive to peace, harmony, and the avoidance of conflict. But I will talk to you. What happened now? This map of the world shows the anticipated climate change hotspots. The redder the color, the more severe the anticipated impact will be. So you are right in the teeth of it here. Some people argue that Cambodia is already gone, like a dead man walking. Large parts of Vietnam will be flooded. In the past 3 years, in the last couple of months, new new sinkholes have appeared as a result of melting permafrost in Siberia and above the Arctic Circle. They release in the permafrost, which is melting, you can see methane escaping, which has been frozen for millions of years, and is about 20 times more aggressive greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. That means there will be more warming. Even if we switched everything off now, more methane will be released, and we risk having a runaway effect. More methane released, more warming, more methane released, and so on and so forth. That would be catastrophic. The Arctic sea ice, we've witnessed in July this month, last month, we've seen the Larsen Sea ice shelf, detach itself of the Antarctic ice shield, the biggest iceberg we've ever had. Arctic sea ice on the other end of our Earth, has sunk to a record low in the winter for the 3rd year running. So you can see the yellow line is where we used to have ice, and you can see where we are now. I will now switch to extinctions. As human populations grow, so does their impact on the environment. So humans are now the primary driver of extinctions in the world. We have dialed up the rate at which species are disappearing to around 1,000 times that of natural rates. As in, if that wasn't terrifying enough, the speed of species loss is expected to be 10,000 times higher in the future, affecting countless terrestrial, marine, and freshwater species. Large-bodied animals are particularly at risk, either because they are in our way or because we like to eat them or their body parts. Thus, we have set 60% of all large herbivores, such as rhinos, elephants, giraffes, hippos, and 3/4 of large predators, including wolves, tigers, lions, on a path to oblivion. Their loss will have far-reaching and unexpected downstream effects, what we biologists call cascading effects, on other species the structure of their habitats and ecological processes. So it's not as if they are gone, then everything else carries on as normal. They are there for a reason. They have an ecological role. So 1 in 4 mammal species is now threatened with extinction, as are 42% of amphibians, all marine turtles, nearly half of crocodiles, a third of all cacti and conifer trees, 60% of freshwater turtles and tortoises, and over 30% of reef-forming corals, sharks, rays, and freshwater crabs and crayfish, to name just some examples. Each species lost means that a unique strand in the web of life and the result of 4 billion years of evolution is gone forever. There are no winners in this global game of Jenga, as each species loss brings us all one step closer to global ecosystem collapse. We have, in the space of about 150 years, managed to wipe out half of the Earth's wildlife in the past of 40 years. Imagine the web of life as an engine, as a big, complicated machine. You take one part out, it may still work. You take 2 parts out, it may still work. You take 40% out, it ain't working no more. The services and the economic value that species provide are irreplaceable and essential for our well-being, unless we live within the limits set by nature and manage our natural resources sustainably. More and more species will be driven towards extinction. If we ignore our responsibility, we will compromise our own survival. So says Dr. Jane Stewart, the director of the IUCN Global Species Program. We tend to think that we are the big boss, we are in charge, the Earth is there for us, we are in control, we can handle everything. But consider this for a moment. Dinosaurs used to be a dime a dozen on the world. Loads of different species dominating the biosphere. They lived on Earth for 150 million years. We've been here for 200,000 years. That's a tiny blip. Some scientists from Oxford University have recently carried out an analysis that was published last month by looking what are the big killers. So to put, at the top, with 70% of species listed on the IUCN Red List, we have overexploitation, agricultural activities, and urban development. Many others which we haven't got time to talk about. So whether for commerce or recreation or subsistence, overexploitation imperils 72% of species on the IUCN Red List. That means we're taking them out for us to eat, to wear, to hang on the wall, as pets, for whatever. Rhinos, giraffes, gorillas, pangolins, bears, tigers, and elephants are just a few of the more than 2,700 species affected by illegal hunting as a result of market demand for their body parts and meat, or by people plugging them from the wild as pets. Some endangered species can now only be found inside protected areas such as national parks, but even there they are not safe anymore. The surge in illegal wildlife trade in recent years has become industrial in scale, and largely due to a rise in demand, I'm afraid to say, in Asia. According to Interpol, wildlife trafficking is worth between $7 and $23 billion a year, and together with arms, narcotics, and human trafficking, now ranks amongst the 4 most lucrative illicit trade commodities. It is driven by transnational organized crime syndicates that target high-value wildlife without regard for the lives of either people or animals that are affected. They corrupt local officials, recruit and arm local poachers, create insecurity, and put local communities into a poverty spiral. Just 2 examples that ram this point home. Every 15 minutes, an elephant is killed for its tusks in Africa. Poaching and the illegal trade in ivory have long been the main threats to these majestic animals. Between 2010 and 2012, more than 100,000 African elephants have been slaughtered for their ivory. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were 10 million. Now there are 415,000. Rhinos, we have lost the rhino picture, so imagine a rhino where there's nothing. Poaching in rhinos for their horn is a similar horror story. Their horn is made of keratin, which is a protein that's the same as your toenails. Has soared in recent years, is used in traditional in Asian medicine, but also increasingly used as a display, as a status symbol, as a party drug to relieve hangovers or for jewelry and other trinkets, and in the tragically mistaken belief that it can enhance male sexual potency. As a result, rhino populations are everywhere under siege. Last year, at least 1,342 African rhinos were killed, the highest number since records began. The full horror of the situation becomes clear when we consider that a single 3-gram dose of rhino horn administered to 3.9% of adults in China and Vietnam would wipe out every single rhino on the planet. The second big killer, agriculture, where we grow our food. 37% of the Earth's land surface has now been converted to farmland or pasture land, and 62% of species are threatened by it. Livestock production accounts for 14.5%, according to the FAO, or to the World Watch Institute, to over 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions, more than the entire transport sector, yet no one talks about it. This is, planes, ships, cars, trains, buses, everything. Also, an FAO report that has just come out is it the end of farming? The FAO has suggested that we may, on average, have about 60 harvests left around the world because we are destroying the topsoil as a result of soil degradation through modern farming techniques and the use of pesticide and herbicides. A third of the world's soil has already been degraded. The main causes are as I mentioned, and if we're hoping to generate new topsoil, it takes about 1,000 years to generate 2 centimeters worth of topsoil. So this is serious stuff. I'll just skip over that. So we've seen the importance of meat production and livestock farming. We've seen the FAO again projects that human populations will increase roughly by 33%, that's the blue line, by 2050, while meat consumption is expected to shoot up by 73%. So whatever we're seeing now is going to get a lot worse. We already live in a world where the collective mass of the world's livestock animals exceed that of wild mammals by at least 10 times. Imagine that. The animals we rear for our food exceed the total body mass of wild mammals by more than a factor of 10. Massive. This upsurge in livestock continues to reduce the availability of grazing and water for wild animals, raises the risk of disease transmission from domestic to wild species, and increases human-wildlife conflict, particularly in developing countries, where livestock production has tripled between 1980 and 2002. This is largely determined by growth in human populations and by per capita income. Because people can afford to buy meat, they buy more of it, which drives rising demands in agricultural land and animal protein and their associated threats to biodiversity. What we see here is the most dangerous animal in the world, and next to it is a shark. We need to act. We need to act. In the words of the famous scientist, Professor Stephen Hawking, who most of you will have heard of, is He said that now more than at any time in our history, our species needs to work together. We are at the most dangerous moment in the development of humanity. So, our children are the future, but not, I guess, in the way most people tend to think about it. Where do we go from here? Recent science has shown that having less children is the biggest contribution to reducing greenhouse gas emissions we can do. Yet everybody feels it is their God-given right to have children, and as many as they want. And they can do that, but there will be consequences. And as the minister has said, call it karma, call it whatever you want to call it. You do what A, B will follow you. This is unpopular, which is why nobody talks about it, but it is a fact. I'm sorry, I'm getting there. The next thing we need to do, and again, unpopular, we need to move away from meat and we need to move towards vegetables. Now, in India and in Eastern cultures, we already have a lot. This has a very much stronger tradition than in the West. But as the minister has said, many cultures try to emulate Western lifestyles, which is a catastrophe. So it takes about 14 times as much land to produce 1 ton of beef than to produce the equivalent amount of grain. And put in a different way, 1 acre of land can produce around 250 pounds of beef or 50,000 pounds of tomatoes, up to 53,000 pounds of potatoes, and 30,000 pounds of carrots. It takes a lot more water, which we know is becoming scarce. So moving towards a plant-based diet is not a pipe dream that, it's been recognized by many individuals, by many countries. China last year announced that it plans to reduce meat consumption amongst its population by 50%. How they want to do that, I'm not sure, but that's what they say they want to do, so we'll see how that goes. There are many health benefits to a plant-based diet, including reducing the risk of heart disease, colon and other cancers, and type 2 diabetes. Just leave this. The UN, not known for its revolutionary, hardcore frontline leadership, is a slow-moving body, has said that we need to move to a vegan or vegetarian diet to save ourselves. And if you think you're maybe too tough or too manly or too whatever, Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight boxing champion, has become a vegan. He says, I wish I was born this way, and I wonder why I was crazy all those years. So there are examples. So the problem is, it's up to us, really, to be the light at the end of the tunnel. But will we be able to pull this off? Who wants change? Everybody. Who wants to change? Not so many. Who wants to lead the change? Even fewer people. So I'm coming to an end, I'm sorry. More than 70 billion animals are raised for slaughter every year. So if you're going to food, to shop, to edit, instead of imagining this, imagine this. Because this is the truth of where your dinner has come from. And this is the same in all cultures. These animals experience hell on earth that we have created for them from the moment they are born to the moment they are cruelly killed. So that's another reason that they are sentient beings, and as Buddhists, we are concerned about sentient beings. We'll skip over this. I've done a bit of research, and this is the last thing I will say, is in the I don't even know how to say this, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha says, meat eating is rejected by me in such sutras as the Hastikakshya, the Mahamega, the Nirvana, and I'm going to leave this to you. You can read this. Meat eating is forbidden by me everywhere, and all the time for those who are abiding in compassion. If, Mahamati, meat is not eaten by anybody for any reason, there will be no destroyer of life. Thus, Mahamati, meat eating I have not permitted to anyone. I do not permit, I will not permit. There may in time to come people be who make foolish remarks about meat eating, saying meat is proper to eat, unobjectionable and permitted by the Buddha. Meat eating is medicine. Again, it is like a child's flesh. Follow the proper measure. The world has changed. Adapt or die. Otherwise, we will end up like this. Thank you for listening. May all beings be happy. I'm sorry, I've done my own overshoot day. Sorry.